Soundgarden hands all over here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. We're broadcasting from the oldest public access TV station in the country, from Grassroots TV in Aspen, Colorado, their first national broadcast, actually global broadcast, as we broadcast around the world on television, on internet, on the radio, and the transcripts are all available at our website, democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. Guests are Stephen Sussman. He is the lead attorney in a precedent-setting lawsuit that was filed earlier this year. The defendants have just responded to the lawsuit that has been filed on behalf of 400 native villagers of Kevalina in Alaska who have to move onto the mainland because of the effects of global warming on their community, on their island. John Holdren is also with us, professor of environmental policy at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. He also teaches in China as well as in India. But Steve Sussman, before we move to the effects of global climate disruption in other parts of the world, you took on the coal industry in Texas. Talk about TXU and what happened.
Well, by the way, I got into this, it's funny, in Aspen, Colorado 3 years ago. The Yale School of Environment had a program here on climate change. My wife was kind of organizing it. So I was the spouse of an organizer when I came. And when I came here, I couldn't spell environment. But reading the materials on the way, I said, there's a role here maybe for lawyers, like the tobacco cases. In any event, I talked then, and then I began, one thing led to another, and then I taught a course on global warming litigation at the law school at the University of Houston. And so I got a call from the mayor of Houston and Dallas that they said, would you be willing to represent on a pro bono basis a coalition of 37 cities in Texas that are opposing the permitting of 11 coal-burning plants by TXU. And never before in history had the Texas cities or municipalities organized themselves together. But because the federal government does nothing, because the state government does nothing, that was a last resort. I said I'd do it. It was a real case. So we went into this case. We spent I had a lot of lawyers from my firm, my partners working on it. And it was a huge fight. We spent $700,000 in expert expenses. So these things are expensive. We had 11 experts. One of the big adverse effects of all these plants would have been they would have put hundreds of millions of tons of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And in fact, they would have undone all of the good that would have been done by the state of California. The governor announced that by 2012 they were going to reduce carbon dioxide emissions by 20% or something like that. Texas would have offset all of that. And Texas would have put itself in like as much as in the top 3 or 4 countries in the world. It's only a state, but it would have been up there in the top 3 or 4 countries in the terms of carbon dioxide. So we were opposing it. Now, we were met with the claim that, well, carbon dioxide is not a pollutant. It doesn't harm anyone. So you can't take account of that. Well, that was a big argument. We succeeded in getting discovery on that. What we were basically proving is that they claim, well, we need additional electric generation. We said, fine, you may need it, but you don't need 11 plants all built at once. This was an effort to have old technology grandfathered. And we found in TXU files the most incredible documents where they were advised, pollute now, because the more you put up there in the atmosphere, caps are coming. And when the caps are imposed, you will be grandfathered. So the more you put up now, the better you will be when regulation finally comes. I mean, just incredible, sinister kind of documents. Well, I think as the case was heated up, we were beginning the trial before the regulatory body when TXU was acquired by KKR, the Texas Pacific Group, and they announced that they were dropping their permits for all 11 plants. So it was successful. The plants are not being built. And, they won't ever be built because there is better technology. The proof is undeniable. In fact, Shell Oil is one of the great innovators in coal gasification. And they claim that this equipment it's ready for prime time. It doesn't create the kind of carbon dioxide that can't be captured. And it's a little more expensive than traditional burning pulverized coal. but it's effective. And so you build one plant at a time using the most up-to-date technology you need, and then it's amazing, in another 12 months before your demand increases for electricity, you build another plant with better technology.
Dr. John Holdren, some scientists believe China has already overtaken the United States when it comes to being the biggest emitter of carbon dioxide. Can you talk about what's happening in China as you teach there?
Well, first of all, it does seem that China passed the United States in 2007 as the world's largest emitter of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is the greenhouse gas that is most responsible for the disruption of global climate. Of that carbon dioxide that human activities emit to the atmosphere, about 3/4 is coming from burning coal and oil and natural gas. About 1/4 is coming from tropical deforestation. China is a huge consumer of coal, huge burner of coal. It's the largest source of energy in China. They have very large amounts of coal, and so they're expanding it rapidly. And that's why they passed the United States. They're still, by the way, far smaller than the United States in emissions per person. They have a lot more persons than we do. They have 4 times the population of the United States. So they've passed us in total emissions, but are not yet close to us in emissions per person. China is starting to worry about this problem. The conventional wisdom in the United States and Europe has been, well, countries like China and India don't really care about climate change. They just care about economic development. They're going to keep burning coal and they're not going to do anything about it. And this, in fact, has been used as an argument for us doing nothing about it. If China's not going to do anything, why should the United States do anything? This is a crazy argument. It's crazy in many dimensions. One, the United States, in terms of its historical role and its technological and economic capacity, ought to take the lead. And China and India and Brazil and Mexico and Indonesia all expect us to take the lead. But the question then becomes, will they follow? If the United States embraces a sensible policy to reduce these emissions, will China and India and Indonesia and Brazil come along? And I think they will, in part on the basis of conversations with Chinese leaders and Chinese scientists over decades. I can tell you that in the last few years, the attitude of the Chinese leadership has changed dramatically about climate change. And the reason their attitude has changed is that they now understand that climate change is already harming China. They understand that a change in the pattern of the monsoons, which govern where it rains and where it doesn't in China, has caused increased flooding in the south of China, increased drought in the north. This is a big problem for China with direct, immediate human impacts. They have figured out that the glaciers on the Tibetan Plateau, which feed the great Chinese rivers and the great Indian rivers, are disappearing at an astounding rate as a result of increased temperatures. The disappearance of those glaciers means that the cycles of flood and drought on those great rivers, which have always been a plague for those countries, are going to get much worse. So China and India as well are now looking for ways to start reducing their emissions of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, and they will, I believe, join the United States and Europe and Japan in embracing serious measures within a few years.
And the corporations' behavior in the